Man has always learned from the past. After all, you can't learn history in reverse. Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth.
So, the story of Archimedes has come to an end. What started as a possible teaser for combat pets or companions, or maybe even possibly mounts, has evolved into a strange and quite dark journey of a dog who's simply in search of his owner. But despite its randomness and complete mystery to how it will actually fit in the new world, there was a story they were telling us in plain sight the entire time. We just had to read between the lines. Let's start with the dog itself. A couple days ago, we made a video talking about this being a possible tease to combat pets, which could still happen for all we know. But I left a comment that day that talked about how the name Archimedes clearly sounded a lot like the name Archimedes. A couple hours after that, they proceeded to change the New World official Twitters and bios to match this freshly introduced animal. One of the tags they included in the New World English Twitter was mathematician. Now, Archimedes of Syracuse was a Greek mathematician and astronomer among other things. One of the things he was famous for is his discovery of the relation between the surface and volume of a sphere and its circumscribing cylinder. I hope up to this point you've taken a look at my previous lore videos, because this is actually huge information. Information that seems to further support the theory that the Greeks once existed on the island of Eternum. The ancients of Eternum, as I mentioned before, just so happened to be astronomers. They studied the stars, and a lot of the things they did revolved around that, including creating artifacts that resembled the object, spheres. You'll also notice that they changed the location of their Twitter page to Amrine Expedition, roughly in the area where we predicted the expedition would actually be in. And it just so happens that if you traveled over there, you would see those giant ancient spheres that were being studied by people like Grenville. And that's where we got some of our information about the ancients too. One thing I do have to apologize for though is this mistake. When we talked about the expedition, I mistake this obelisk in the background for being the Shattered Obelisk. It doesn't have its features, and judging by the location, this obelisk is actually more than likely one of the ones around Amrine Temple, like Carina or Cygnus. But why would they name this dog after Archimedes of all people? They could have named the dog King Barkther or Albert Wolfstein, but they take a mathematician, a Greek one no less, and make a name that plays on him instead. At first I thought maybe it was a coincidence until they put mathematician in the Twitter bio. And if this was a hat tip to the ancients being Greeks, then we've got much bigger stories to look forward to. For the expedition itself, I want to dial back to a previous video we did about the Siren Queen. To give some quick backstory, this is a woman who led an expedition to this island, and through unfortunate circumstances ended up losing her soul. But somehow after that she developed a way to control and transform her crewmates, and it just so happens that those crewmates were transformed into the Lost. The undead pirates though, not the withered that are on the other side of that spectrum. And in that video, there were multiple pages that talked about what she did, and how she was still able to make them obedient until we came to the page that comes from Sileo Secco. And in this page, it talks about the discovery of a device that seems capable of manipulating or even stealing the soul. And this is ancient technology. It also theorized that it may have been the cause of the withered version of the Lost on the island, and I myself theorized that the Siren Queen may have twisted that transformation somehow to create the more advanced and more obedient undead pirates. Here's the thing about the expedition. I'm sure you noticed when we did the analysis, but literally everybody in here has been turned into the Lost. But the crucial part here is that they're constantly giving us clues that Archimedes does recognize them. First couple tweets, the withered that we fight with Archimedes seem familiar to him. They have the same presence of Master Simon's crew. Next couple tweets, we come across a wraith that looks incredibly familiar. Archimedes recognizes them as the Foreman Nakashima to be exact, which means Middle Island in Japanese. And we finally come across Simon Gray, and we can clearly see that he's not himself anymore. He's become a withered giant. Now, the entire purpose of this expedition in the first place was that Simon Gray went on a trip in the Windward area in search of powerful technology from the ancients that could be a massive asset to fight the corrupted. And it appears they must have found something. It seems that whatever was in this cave was capable of turning these people into the Lost. Thing is, there's no ancient guardians in here whatsoever, and they said it was buried. like hidden away. So what I'm thinking is that the device that popped up inside the Siren Queen story, there's probably another one inside here too. And Mr. Simon Gray, either intentionally or accidentally, could have started experimenting on himself and his crew to try to transform them into something that could take on the corrupted. Or they could have easily ran into the withered that were already down here and turned into them as a result. Either way it goes, it seems to confirm, or at the very least suggest, that these ancients had something to do with creating the lost, and quite possibly the corrupted. The way I see it, their technology might have turned on them very quickly, or they were facing annihilation and had to do something to preserve their engines of destruction. Because if that device or any device like this exists on Eternum, and it somehow made its way back to the real world, the results would be catastrophic. But again, we're left with more questions than answers. Questions of who made the corrupted, who made the lost, and who is the most dangerous on the island. Because I'm afraid both Isabella and the Siren Queen will have to move aside. The corrupted Empress, who's creating an army in Ebonscale Reach, will soon be joining the roster. And from what I've seen already, things are gonna get pretty crazy. But with that, thank you all so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I've already read through some amazing counter theories like Eternum possibly being the lost city of Atlantis. One day we'll find out the truth about this island, and I hope it's a good one. Have a wonderful night or day, folks, and farewell.